former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you for having me.
Before I ask you about the day's news, you were, when you first became Prime Minister in 1999, did you have a plan like the one that was unleashed on Friday, ready to go?
Oh, that stage 25 years ago, the nuclear program of Iran was so embryonic. They worked on how to make the natural ore of uranium, which contained just 0.7% of the isotope 235, which is needed for bomb, and how to make it 3.5, kind of what they call yellow cake. It was too primitive and too legal operation that we did not consider. But later on, some 7 years ago, I was Minister of Defense, and then under Netanyahu in 2010, 11, and 12, we considered very seriously to make such an attack. At the time, we believed that we can delay the Iranian nuclear program, but 2.5 to 3 years, it was enough to encourage us to do it. But we failed to convince even our inner cabinet that it is a compelling imperative. Neither myself, Netanyahu, and Minister Lieberman, we could not convince even the inner cabinet, so we have to give it up at the time. Now it became much more clear because they are de facto what's called threshold nuclear power. Iran means that they have enough fissile material almost in weapon grade, and they cannot be easily blocked from having their first crude device to explode somewhere in the desert or to build the first nuclear weapons.
So the aim of this operation, is it to take out Iran's nuclear program? And if so, will that be successful, or is it regime change?
It is a formal, but probably the genuine intention is to remove and destroy the Iranian nuclear military program once and for all. Problem is that because Iran is so close to nuclear weapon, it's not easy to do it. To the best of my judgment, Israel cannot delay the capacity to detonate the first crude device by more than several weeks, and probably even America cannot delay them by more than a few months. So that's make the only viable approach or path towards putting an end to any pretension of Iran to turn military nuclear. It ends up that it's only if you topple the regime. So no one talks about it explicitly, but that might be the idea beyond the attempt to bring America in, because to topple the regime, probably it's an objective which fits better for a joint operation of Israel and America rather than Israel alone.
And do you see that feasibly happening? We heard the U.S. president earlier saying he's still open to the idea of talks. He claims that the Iranians even suggested they were ready to come to the White House. We saw a plane, by the way, land in Oman in the last hours, an Iranian presidential plane.
The statements of President Trump is not easy to follow. They are not always very consistent, but that's probably negotiating tactics. I personally believe that it's feasible. Technically, it's feasible. If American president would have decided that the time had come to topple down this regime, he probably could achieve it. But it's my impression that President Trump doesn't want to end up there. He probably might consider a one-time shot to show support for Israel to attack this installation in Fordow, which needed heavy American munitions that Israel do not have in order to penetrate it. Probably he will consider one-time show to weaken Iran even more. I don't believe that he will go into a full-scale war. Well, remember, I believe that America did not win any war in the last 75 years. They didn't win Korea, they didn't win Vietnam, they didn't win Iraq, they didn't win Afghanistan. So to think that they are going to defeat Iran is not a kind of trivial kind of thought. Iran is almost 100 million people and spread over an area which is about half of Europe. It's a big country with long tradition, strong Iranian identity. They are not going to evaporate very easily.
So hang on a sec. You've just told us that, first off, that you can delay by just a couple of months if you take out as much as you can of the military installations, if that, Iran's nuclear program, that attempting regime change, it backfires. So are you suggesting that this is not a good idea?
No. For Israel, it was almost a compelling imperative to enter to such a war, because according to the cabinet, they have an intelligence report which showed to them that Iran is rushing toward weaponization, what's called it, building a weapon. And that's the last opportunity to try to block it, even if the results are uncertain. It might be justified in Israeli point of view. And in fact, the impact of the operation the last 5 days is extremely impressive. The far-sighted planning, very high quality planning and resolute execution, everything that was missing from the picture in October 7 of 2023. And it resumed the self-confidence of the public in its defense forces and its leadership. It resumes the deterrence of Israel in the region. It strengthened our positioning within the area. And the Iranians are suffering major blows in many aspects. So from Israeli, somewhat narrow, so to speak, but in a way existential point of view, it's justifiable. But having said that, there are 4 scenarios where it can develop right now. Let me count them. Number 1 is America joins hands with Israel and put an objective of toppling down the regime. I already mentioned it's not highly probable, except for a one-time attack on some installation. Number 2 is that a weakened, slightly humiliated and more vulnerable Iran will end up agreeing to a negotiation with much softer positions that might lead probably to an agreement which is in certain aspects better than the JCPOA, which Trump left in 2018, which, when he left it, he basically enabled Iran to close the gap. At the time in 2018, where he was encouraged by our government to do it, Iranians were about 18 months afar from turning into what I call threshold nuclear power. But within those last 7 years, they closed the gap. They are now probably 18 days, probably minus 18 days. They're already there. But that's the second option, more probable and in a way better for the world. Number 3 is the possibility of having a long attrition war between Israel and Iran. Americans might help us with munitions and some help in defense and so on, but will not be intervening. That's bad for Israel. It's bad for the Iranians, I believe, as well. It's not a good prospect, having a long, undecided war of attrition. And the worst one is the possibility that the whole project will not delay the Iranian reaching a nuclear capability, but might accelerate it, because Iran might argue that Israel, which is perceived by the world to be a nuclear power, backed by America, which is clearly a nuclear superpower, the Iranians will argue they attacked us and left us with no choice but to reach nuclear power for ourselves. And because, as I mentioned, they have the fissile material, and as Grossi, the head of the IAEA in Vienna, said just a few days ago, the next generation of installations are already being built 800 meters underneath the ground, beyond the reach of any kind of weapon. And probably said that already the most sensitive elements of the Iranian nuclear program are probably already hidden in such sites. So it's still a possibility. I hope it will not materialize, but there is certain risk that the whole story will accelerate Iran rush toward nuclear weapons.
Yeah, and there's another scenario which we haven't mentioned, which is, and as you say, Iran feeling humiliated from this surprise attack from last Friday. that perhaps a degraded Iran reaches for chemical or biological weapons, hits back any way it can.
Yeah, probably. I don't think that the rush toward the nuclear weapon means that they will use it. I think that the same way that the North Korea never thought seriously about dropping a bomb on South Korea and Japan or Americans in Guam, it's basically in order to protect the survivability and power of the Kim dynasty. They understand that if they attack with a nuclear weapon any neighbor or the Americans, they will be brought back to the Stone Age. So they are not that stupid. The same applies to the Iranians. They are highly sophisticated people. I don't think that they will ever dare to think of dropping a bomb.
It's more for protection. Mr. Prime Minister, I just want to play. I just want to play you a short clip of France's president coming back from just before he left the G7 summit in Western Canada, and on this whole issue of regime change. Here's what Emmanuel Macron had to say.
We don't want Iran to acquire nuclear weapons or ballistic capabilities, but I think the biggest mistake we can make today is to use military means to bring about regime change in Iran, because that would mean chaos.
Parce que ce sera là le chaos.
All right, vous ne parlez pas français, so we translated it for you. Ehud Barak, Emmanuel Macron reminding us that regime change from the outside, it's not just the Americans, it's anybody. It doesn't work.
You know, it's you can find along the way in history different examples which point to different directions. We cannot predict it. Question is whether EU can afford sitting idle and trying, when it's clear that they are trying to become military nuclear, to handle, to bet on the possibility that somehow they disappear, evaporate at certain point. It probably will happen, but you cannot build on it. Without doing anything, it's too dangerous on its own. I can tell you that some changes of regime, the one that was imposed upon Nazi Germany, the one that was imposed upon Japan, worked very well. Some other examples are there. Even some of them in Iran, the CIA and the MI6 replaced Mossadegh in the 50s. You are probably too young to remember it, by the Shah Pahlavi. And for some 30 years or 40 years, he was in power, and it was a much better Iran than we have right now. So I cannot predict it. Time will tell. Now we are already in war. It's not an abstract question. When you are at war, we have to make sure we win it or end it in a proper way.
What is certain is that this has changed, certainly, the conversation. This was supposed to be the week where the French president was hoping to talk about a two-state solution at a UN conference in New York. Instead, the latest massacre of civilians in Gaza has gone largely unnoticed. You gave an interview to Israel's Channel 13 a couple of days ago where you were calling out the fact that the hostages in Gaza, the Israeli hostages, have been forgotten. No. Does Gaza just get forgotten now?
No, I hope not. I think that that's an opportunity here. We are now celebrating the successes of the first week, so to speak. You cannot exactly predict what will be the situation in a month or 3 months from now. So that's a real opportunity to put an end to the war in Gaza, to release all the hostages, bring them home. And one big war against Iran is enough for the Israelis. Something that I mentioned is that it raised certain suspicion about the quality of judgment of our government, because Netanyahu, probably a week ago, said in his own voice that the operation was planned already to be executed in April. And for some reason that did not detail, was postponed to June. So to speak that an Israeli government, in its full senses, sat down in the end of March or beginning of April, planning an operation, a full-scale war against Iran during the month of April, and didn't think of the need to, first of all, to put end to the old war in Gaza and release some 5 divisions of our forces and to bring home the hostages before the whole thing become more complex. That shows that there was certain element of irresponsibility in the attitude toward the hostages. And it reminds the public, majority of the public, that Netanyahu was caught at least 2 or 3 times along the last 20 months, where he practically torpedoed opportunities to bring back the hostages, not because he doesn't want to see them home. I'm sure he genuinely wants to see them back home. But when it clashes with the survivability of his government or the peace of his coalition, he yields to the temptation to not to risk his survivability in power, even at the price of abandoning the hostages. That's extremely painful and will need kind of a day of accountability.
So when the Israeli Prime Minister thinks back all the way to March, as you say, about this operation in Iran, how much of that is a personal calculus to ensure his re-election?
I do not buy it. You know, I know from experience you cannot differentiate the gestalt of a political leader, make it the political leader, the statesman, the one who looks at history, the private individual with his inner weaknesses or private interests. I cannot fully penetrate the soul or the subconscious of Netanyahu. But I assume that here, this case, it's something serious and genuine. It's not any kind of, it was not born out of this idea how to survive his government. I hope and believe that that's the case. Of course, I cannot prove it.